Hello YouTube, and welcome to Musing About Music, the show that talks about music past, present, and future. As promised, we are on schedule this week, despite the fact that I'm writing this 1 hour before my deadline for Artistic Hell to actually be able to make it look nice. We'll try to keep it that way in the future. If you are with us 2 weeks ago, we talked a little bit about Australia's musical culture for Australia Day. And now we are going to bring the conversation up to today's modern trends. But first, before we begin, it's time for Lonely Fact, the part of the show where I take a fact from my research that I couldn't fit anywhere else in my script, and I ask you, the viewer, a trivia question. Today's question: Johnny O'Keefe springboarded his rise to fame by imitating which American artists? As always, I'll give you the answer at the end of the video, so stick around. So, we left off last time with rock, and boy is this a big one. Some names that you might know are the Bee Gees, AC/DC, and In Excess. Johnny O'Keefe's Wild One was the first Australian rock and roll tune to make national charts. Australia then moved between the subgenres of pub rock, bringing Men at Work's Down Under, and then to indie rock, and then a rock renaissance later on. But let's look at it wave by wave with a stronger lens. The first wave. Around the mid-1950s, when America was doing its rock and roll thing, Festival Records joined the fun in Australia with Bill Haley and his Comets' Rock Around the Clock in '56. This wave could be classified as grungy, also adding some jazz background to the songs. The second wave. Thanks to the Beatles, many audiences began to prefer a clean-cut rock. Kind of an oxymoron, if you ask me. The new beat style is epitomized by the Bee Gees, who relocated to England to keep themselves growing in popularity. There were several others in this time period: Twilights, The Groove, La-Di-Da's, but the Bee Gees are probably the best known. Third wave. As the groups of the 1960s began to dissolve, the 70s brought AC/DC's progressive sounds. Skyhooks began to make their move towards new wave music, and punk rock bands and electronical musical groups began to emerge. As last week went, if I went into full detail here, I'd bore you all, and also be taking way longer than a few minutes, so I'll encourage you to look into some of this section on your own, and I'll move on myself. Shut Up You Face in 1980 marked the independence of Australian rock. Around this time is where Down Under came out, as well as The Locomotion from soap star Kylie Minogue from soap star Kylie. The biggest thing here, though, is the group Dead Can Dance and Yothu Yindi, who created Aboriginal rock, a pretty neat hybrid of sounds. I already talked a while about indie and alternative rock, which hit around the 1990s, but what I did not mention was The Big Day Out, a Woodstock of sorts for Australia, basically featuring some of the biggest Australian and international acts with an alternative and indie rock focus. Enough about rock, though. Let's finish this out with electronic and dance music, which was experimented on as early as 1979, but really came out in the 1990s. One of the biggest names in the genre are the Avalanches, with their album Since I Left You. A school of synthesis was also set up in Melbourne to help appeal to this genre's composers. In fact, it is suggested that this genre leads Australian music overseas, despite its struggle locally. For this genre, there's a large list, but you may have heard of the Stafford Brothers, or Art versus Science. Obviously, I'm still only scratching the surface here. I mean, I haven't even mentioned the Sydney Opera House. Okay, now I just did. We're good. In that case, time for the answer to our lonely fact. The artists that Johnny O'Keefe imitated to help launch his career are Elvis Presley and Little Richard. And with that, our lonely fact has been answered. Seriously though, if you would like me to continue exploring this topic in the next video, let me know in the comments. Make sure you don't miss any of my videos by hitting that subscribe button right there. We'll see you next time on Musing About Music in 2 weeks, and in between, I'll be featuring a new video type, Shocking Statements.